Okay, so now Gemini is night strong, but front rising. So that means that, okay, signs that are night strong are signs that are full of ideas. Signs that are day strong are signs that are full of know-how and the ability to get things done in the concrete world. And Gemini is unique in that it is night strong and full of ideas, but also front rising, which means able to bring their ideas to concrete realization. So full of know-how as well. So he not only has ideas, but also the skills and abilities to make a success of those ideas. And that's something I've noticed about Gemini, at least Gemini Sun people, is that the right and left sides of their brains, they seem to work together really well.
Mm-hmm.
Like they can be good in art and good in math or science. You know, those are things we usually separate as being left brain or right brain. They're able to do both.
They have a balance between the dualities.
Yes. Okay, now for the element, which is different than Vata, I believe. Or is it?
The element? It'll be the same, because the element will be air, the dosha will be Vata.
Yeah, so how are they different?
They're not different.
So Vata is intellectually centered?
It is, it's enthusiastic, it's talkative, it's about, there's a lot of ideas with air element, just like how, like the club suit is ruled by air element,
Okay.
With a lot of air, you have a lot going on, it's like.
Sorry, go ahead.
Vata's principle of movement, So wherever there's Vata, wherever there's air, there's going to be motion. There's going to be movement of some kind. So there'll be intellectual movement, there'll be physical movement. It's a sign of activity.
Okay. And Parashara also says that the intellectual faculty of the air signs is not completely logical. And so they always find a reason to disagree, which is like when you study any field of knowledge, it doesn't matter what it is, any field of knowledge, there's always controversy and disagreement within it.
That's right.
So that is, well, the element of air. And Gemini in particular has the capacity to understand processes and concepts and uses its intellect to develop techniques and skills because it's the hands, which represents tools. So Vata, though, you said is a dosha. Can you explain that a little bit? Because it sounds like it's exactly like the air element, but it sounds like there's something a little different there too.
Yeah, there are two different categories of expression, So the elements make up all of manifestation can be understood as being comprised of the 5 elements. When those 5 elements group together into like the microcosm, the human being, we describe it as dosha. So dosha is just a way of describing the play of the 5 elements within the human body as a physiological governing process. So the doshas are just a way of describing what the elements are doing, as an intelligent process to maintain life in the body. So like Vata is made up of air and space. So it's another way of just describing the elements, basically, doshas are.
Okay, thank you for that. And I'm sure people were wondering. Okay, so now for the guna. And that's spelled Guna. And the gunas are Sattvic, Rajas, Tamas. I believe there's only 3.
There's only 3.
And the air signs, Aries, Taurus, Gemini, and Libra are the guna of Rajas. And Rajas it's more of it's an action-oriented guna. And for Gemini in particular, it motivates with trivial interests, games, and entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that an interesting way to put it for Rajas?
They like to have fun.
Yeah, they like to have fun. Because Mercury is playful in many ways.
Rajas is about stimulation, So
Yeah.
Rajas will find itself in, motivated by anything that is stimulating. Anything that lights your fire, is going to be fair game. So Rajas is all about being like expansive and motivated and stimulated and extroverted, and that's the quality of Rajas.
That's a really interesting way to put it. Okay, so now we're talking about caste. And caste is not the way it's actually practiced in India. This is more of a temperament thing that we're talking about here. It's the pure description of a temperament. And the castes are Brahmin, which are the water signs, Kshatriyas, which are the warrior or the fire signs, and then the Vaishyas, which are the earth signs. And this is going to be different from Western astrology as well. And even in Vedic astrology, there's some debate on what the air signs, if they're really Sudra caste or if they are Vaishya caste. So just know that. This is a good example of what I was saying earlier, that in any body of knowledge, there's always disagreement and debate. And this is one of them. So according to Brihaparashara, the air signs, Libra, Aquarius, and Gemini, are Sudra caste. Now, and then Libra and Gemini in particular are Rajas, and so therefore full of passion to pursue the immediate fulfillment of their desires. So do you want to explain a little bit more for everybody what the Sudra caste actually means in terms of temperament?
Shudra caste, well, the castes are basically like a hierarchy, that describe states of consciousness. And so the Brahmin caste is associated with, the highest things, spirituality, scholarship, priestly things, the things that belong to the higher order of nature. And Shudra is the other extreme. Shudra is earth. It's like the base things, the concrete things, the things that are the most material and immediate, the objects of the senses, the so-called low things, So it's not a value judgment. It's just that there is a hierarchy to nature. There's spirit and there's form, So Shudra is the most tuned in with forms, They're in that sense physically oriented, and like you just said, interested in the more or less immediate gratification of their desires. So some people might see that as being a kind of gross quality, physically oriented quality,
Or animal, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And in a society, in order for it to work well, all of the castes must be present, and they must interact with each other in order for things to work.
That's right.
So that's why there's no value judgment involved in that.
Somebody has to be attentive to the things of the earth, If everybody was, in the Brahmin state of consciousness, then
Right.
we would need a different society, right? The way society is right now, it depends on the hierarchy more or less. But also, irrespective of society, they represent like an internal disposition, And in that sense, it's considered to be ideal to aspire to the disposition of the Brahmin, which is generous, giving, Jupiterian, wise, we should all acquire those traits, in other words. So the Brahmin consciousness is not about self-interest. It's not about monetary gain in and of itself. It's not about the mere fulfillment of desire. It's about, the higher purposes of things. So that's considered to be an auspicious thing for everyone, regardless of their role in society, to aspire to. The Shudra caste has its, qualities as well, as we were saying.
Yeah, without the Sudra caste, the Brahmins wouldn't be able to just sit around and read scriptures and...
Yeah, and think about Gemini. I mean, these are the people who, as we said before, are able to use their tools, like create things and utilize things. So we need those people, the crafty people, the creative people who can manage the imminency of life, otherwise we don't have a foundation.
Right, exactly. Okay, so the feet of the signs. So now we're talking about the feet, and Gemini is a two-footed sign. And then the two-footed ones are adaptable, but not particularly strong. and their strength is in their ability to adapt. Okay, so what's the difference between the two-footed and the four-footed and the footless is that the two-footed signs are particularly interested in the first house things, which is thinking and following one's true nature and path.
Well, there's
And
but
their interests.
the two-footed signs are going to be more resourceful in certain ways, because being two-footed allows for the hands to be liberated and usable,
Right. And then because we talked about this last time, we can end with the color of the sign of Gemini. And the color for the sign of Gemini is blue. But it says in here green. So Ernst changed this later on.
Changed it.
He changed it because of his research in gemology. Mm-hmm. He did a lot of research and testing and came to the conclusion that Gemini is actually blue. So if you get a gemstone prescription from a Vedic astrologer, at least the ones who studied with Ernst, because he's the only person I know of, I'm talking about Ernst Wilhelm, is the only person I know of who has actually done extensive research and testing in gems. And most of the time, people, they just do what they've been taught. And nobody's really done a lot of research into this except for Ernst, as far as I know. And so you may get a different gem prescription from a student of Ernst than you would maybe another Vedic astrologer simply because of that. And the gemstones that correspond to Gemini, no matter what planet it is in, the color is going to be blue. You want to say anything about that, Neeshee? Rishi.
Yeah, I think it's just interesting. It's good for people to know that there actually isn't any real description of gemstones in the ancient astrological texts. I mean, all of the ideas about gems came much later. So there isn't really anything defined per se that's like, this is Vedic gemstone, teachings. It's really up for consideration. And what people had outlined before were the 9 gems, but Ernst has developed a very intricate system that I think is really quite genius. So.
Yeah, because it's truly, he's trying to use the scientific method as much as possible.
Yeah, which makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, if we're going to, talk about astrology as a science, even though it's a spiritual science, and it's not necessarily always able to be validated in any kind of a concrete way, though at times it can be, because, people tell you, yeah, that's really true. That's exactly what happened. And they can give you actually events when you talk to them about their chart. But nevertheless, there's still an element to it that is not concrete.
Yeah, it's a science of correlations,
Yeah, science of correlations.
If you can see those correlations, then it works. And Ernst found a way to see a level of correlations with gemstones, signs, and planets and colors that I think hasn't really been articulated so far.
Yes, and Gemini rules the natural third house, and the third house is the house of communication.
Right.
And the various types of communication. And it also rules your daily round, which is the things that you do in your daily life, like go to the store, you go to the post office,
routines,
all that kind of stuff. Yeah, your immediate neighborhood. And Gemini rules cities too, which I think is interesting, which makes a lot of sense because people get together because they want to be able to talk to each other about ideas.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes sense that Gemini would rule cities because of that.
Yeah, and I've noticed connecting a lot of abilities being acted upon. Cities are a place of a lot of exertion, work, focus, collective intensity. So
yeah. Another thing I've noticed about Gemini, and I think because it's the natural ruler of the third house, is their ability to take on accents or to mimic people.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting.
Yeah, and that's probably a Mercury thing. And I've noticed that my Gemini husband, if we watch a movie or something that takes place in the South or in Ireland, or it doesn't matter where it is, he'll start talking in that accent.
You know, my grandfather is a Gemini ascendant, and he also is very experimental, but he also is really good at mimicking, like animal sounds, and like when we were really young, he would like mimic like animal sounds and like, you know, to excite us as babies or whatever. But yeah, and similarly, he can imitate just about anybody. To confirm your observation.
Yes, right. And after a couple days of that,
he loves to talk.
Loves to talk, right.
Geminis are very talkative, conversationalist people.
Yes, and he loves to talk about ideas. And after a couple hours of that accent stuff, I have to tell him, look, please, can I have my husband, my normal husband back? Yeah, because it's like, and it's so good too. You wouldn't be able to tell that he wasn't actually from one of those places. So anyway, if you guys enjoyed this, please hit like and subscribe. And if you have a comment about Geminis, if you are a Gemini sun or you know Gemini people, Gemini rising, or people with a lot of planets in the sign of Gemini, I'd love to hear, both of us would love to hear anything you have to say about that. Okay, and then until next month, where we will be talking about the sign of Cancer. Until then, goodbye.